Timmy pushed John on the floor and pounced on him. He was hitting and slapping him with no mercy. John knew that Timmy has been possessed again. He began to call Timmy by his name. He was screaming, "Timmy, it's me, your brother. Timmy, stop, please stop." When Timmy realized that he was hitting his brother, he began to struggle to stop, but the Cora in him was stronger. At a time, John managed to place his hand on a bottle and hit Timmy's head with the bottle. Timmy fell aside, touched his head and noticed blood. His eyes turned red and he pounced on John again. This time, he fiercely hooked John's neck, trying to strangle him. John was tapping and stretching for help, but the spirit in Timmy was determined to kill him. The moment John died, Timmy realized himself. He couldn't believe what he has done. He lifted John's head and let out a thunderous cry. John was his twin brother and the only relative alive. They were separated at the age of 6 after their parents died. Timmy was adopted by Mr. and Mrs. Edwin, a couple that were looking for kids. John, on the other hand, was taken by an old woman that needed a companion. Fortunately, John had a good life. He was sent to school to the university level. With the help of his foster mother, he got a job in a reputable company. Unlike John, Timmy was not that lucky. Initially, he was treated fine by his foster parents, but the moment they had their first kid, the story changed. The couple abandoned him. He stopped going to school. He only eats from their crumbs. They hit him at every slight mistake, shout at him and call him all sorts of names. They always remind him that he was an orphan, and nobody will save him if they throw him out in the street. Due to the incessant cursing and beating, Timmy lost his self-esteem. He became naive and easily intimidated. Even in the hood, his mates bully him. They use him as an object for mockery. Everybody has something on him. Every kid has something on him. As time goes on, Timmy became a shadow of himself. He began to cherish darkness and serenity so much that he became his own best friend. He loved being in the dark, walking in the dark. One night, he was hiding in his cuckoo as usual, then he felt a breeze. He shivered and cringed to himself. Again, he felt a touch and thought is one of his foster parents. A voice called him by his name. He opened his eyes but couldn't see anything because everywhere was dark. He lit a candle and saw a faceless heart-like creature that has illuminating lights in the center. He was overwhelmed by fear, but the creature told him to keep calm. It has come to help him out of his timid life. He introduced himself to Timmy as Takora, the voice to the voiceless, the strength to the weak, and the spirit that resides in the darkest parts of the mind. He promised to help Timmy eliminate all his oppressors, only if Timmy could give his body voluntarily. Timmy refused and started shouting. Mrs. Edwin entered the room and slapped him for disturbing the whole house. When she left, Takora reappeared to Timmy and promised that he could turn his foster mother to his slave if he can lend his body to Takora. Timmy still was not convinced, so he shunned Takora. What Timmy did not know was that Takora was a blood-sucking demon that fed on human flesh. Throughout the night, Takora's voice kept echoing in Timmy's head. In the morning, while doing his chores, the voice was ringing in his head. Even when he was walking on the road. This lingered for about 2 weeks. Timmy got used to it. He stopped being afraid of Takora. Takora told him everything he would gain if he could give his body to him, but Timmy kept resisting. One day, he was on an errand. When he got to where his mates were playing football, the boys turned to him and began to taunt him as usual. They were making jest of him, some were dragging him, while others were knocking him. He stood up to one of them to let him be, but he received the beating of his life. He was beaten blue and black, to the extent that he was vomiting blood. He was crying and cringing in pain when Takora appeared to him. Out of pain and despair, he told Takora to possess him. Immediately, Takora entered his body through his nostrils, in form of smoke. Timmy stretched himself, His eyes turned green and he stood up. The boys were surprised to see him stood up with such energy. Timmy approached them, grabbed one of them in the neck and strangled him to death. Others wanted to run but Timmy glued them with muscle pull. He began to tap their head one after the other and all the boys became dumb and paralyzed. Timmy abandoned his errand and went back home. When Mrs. Edwin saw him, she asked about the things he's supposed to buy. Timmy ignored him and entered inside the house. She followed him with cane but met a scary creature instead. She was shocked but she couldn't move because Timmy seized her. Timmy took the cane from her hand and began to flog her. Timmy gave her 200 lashes all over her body. He made her cook a delicious meal for him. In the evening while Timmy was eating, Mrs. Edwin knelt beside him. When Mr. Edwin entered the house, he was surprised to see Timmy seated comfortably in the dining and his wife kneeling beside him. Mr. Edwin wanted to talk but became dumb instantly. Timmy walked up to him and made him kneel down. He told Mr. Edwin to write his wills immediately. Being that the man was illusional, he wrote his will and handed everything he had to Timmy. Timmy turned to a monster and consumed Mr. Edwin and their children and made Mrs. Edwin watch him. Timmy turned Mrs. Edwin to his slave. He hits the woman for pleasure. Sometimes, he sleeps with her at will. Timmy took over all their properties. He began to live a reckless life. At a time, he got tired of Mrs. Edwin and fed on her. However, John, Timmy's brother, has become a big boy, so he decided to go in search of his twin brother Timmy. When John got to Mr. and Mrs. Edwin's house address, he was surprised to meet Timmy living comfortably as the owner of the house. Timmy was also happy to see him. He warmly welcomed John. After dinner, out of curiosity, John asked Timmy of Mr. and Mrs. Edwin. Being that the name irritates the demon in Timmy, he was flared up. Timmy opened his mouth to talk, but Takora shut him up. John saw Timmy struggling to stop something but he couldn't. He asked me if he was okay. Timmy hurriedly left the dining, entered his room and locked himself. Takora departed from him. Timmy was very angry because Takora wanted to harm John for mentioning Mrs. Edwin. Timmy and Takora had a hot argument in that room, while John was eavesdropping at the door. John realized that Timmy has done something to the couple. John was determined to help his brother only if he can tell him what the problem was, so he kept mentioning Mr. and Mrs. Edwin. At the mention of the couple, Timmy turns green in rage. Timmy warned John severally to stop mentioning the couple's name in that house but John would not stop. Again, John realized that Timmy leaves the house every midnight and returns early in the morning. There was also steady complaint of animal attack that feed on people in the hood, so John knew that Timmy had turned to something else. Timmy began to avoid John so that Takora would not harm him. One night, they both went to bed same time. John secretly locked Timmy inside his room. When it was time for Timmy to go for hunt as usual, he realized that John had locked the door. Timmy began to bang the door, warning John to open the door, but John told the spirit inside Timmy to leave his brother for him. Timmy continued banging the door till 5 a.m. By 7 a.m., John opened the door. Being that Takora can't stay for 24 hours without human blood, he pounced on John to feed on him. Timmy tried his best to resist him, until when John hit Timmy's head with butter, he pounced on John, strangled and sucked his blood. Timmy realized himself after sucking John's blood. He lifted John's body and kissed him. He left the house in anger. Takora was begging him because he knew that if Timmy harmed himself, he would also harm Takora. He got to an express and was knocked down by a bus in high speed. Takora left his body instantly. Luckily, Timmy survived. He took John to the village for burial. After John's funeral, Timmy sold his properties and relocated to another city to start a new life. Do not inflict pains on others and do not nurture pain for long time to avoid being consumed by negative spirits or thoughts. That is the end. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.